Hi there, everyone. Kellen Davian here, and today I'm going to be walking you through one of the most important and prominent figures in South Africa history, modern South Africa history, Steve Biko or Steve Bantu Biko. When we think of the resistance movements or political change, we often think of these figures as military leaders, politicians, or people who had some official power of some sort. But Steve Biko actually was never a soldier, held political office, or commanded any army. The only thing that he really commanded was the minds and hearts of this generation. He was a profound thinker, an organizer, and one of the clearest voices of Black identity in South Africa during the harshest years of the apartheid movement. His ideas sparked confidence among younger generations where there was fear, um, gave pride where there was shame, and unity when there was division of people groups. As we're going to talk about later, Steve Biko died at the young age of 30, but his influence didn't end there. His death actually made him an international symbol throughout the world of courage, dignity, and resistance through hard times. Today, we're going to go over his life and his upbringing, his characters and leadership styles, the major accomplishments he had, the philosophy he created, and the powerful legacy that he left behind. Just for a little brief biography on Steve Biko, he was born on December 18th, 1946, in King Williamstown, which on this map, if you look at this orange circle, go straight down to East London. It's just to the left of that, which was a small town located in Africa's Eastern Cape, as we can see. And he came from the Xhosa ethnic group, which was the same cultural group as Nelson Mandela. And he kind of was the head of the Black consciousness movement. In his early life, Biko was attended Lovedale High School, where his political awareness began to shape. Although he was not really involved in any sort of politics yet, he was actually expelled because of his brother. They expected that he was guilty by association when his brother was a part of these anti-apartheid movements. So that's when his eyes kind of opened up to the segregation going on in this time. From there, he attended St. Francis College, which was a Catholic boarding school known for its progressive atmosphere. This progressive atmosphere is what exposed Biko to the broader ideas, which allowed him to interact with peers that came from different backgrounds. Many people described the period of this time is when Steve Biko actually woke up and kind of realized the issues that were going on in the Eastern Cape specifically. From there, we get to his university years, which is when he enrolled at the University of Natal, the Black section, which was in Durban, to study medicine. At this time, he was not studying politics or going to school for politics, actually. But that is where the political journey took off. When he was a medical student, he saw how the apartheid infiltrated the education system and healthcare. And he was able to meet thinkers, activists, and students who were frustrated with the representation of their people in this time. And this pushed his curiosity into action. Through this time of activism, Biko moved between Durban and his hometown in the Eastern Cape. But from there, the government actually put him on house arrest, essentially, having a banning order where he was only allowed to stay in the Eastern Cape, or in King Williamstown, thinking that that would be what could stop his influence on society. But they were completely wrong, as Biko was an activist and pushed for change. He wasn't just going to give in. During this time, he drew influence to major figures during this movement, such as Frantz Fanon, who wrote about the psychology of oppression, Malcolm X, who had an emphasis on Black pride, and many other leaders, such as Nelson Mandela. They actually kind of worked alongside each other briefly during this time. but essentially he was shaping the core of the Black consciousness movement. Before we go too much farther, I think it's very important to look at the character traits and attributes that Steve Biko possessed, just being able to understand him a little bit better. Biko was incredibly intelligent. It was once said, actually, that in school, as he was uh, passing with flying colors, his classmates said they never saw him study, but he was incredibly smart. He was sharp, thoughtful, and quick witted, and had the ability to break down these complex political uh, situations and make them very simple and relatable, which allowed him to be a natural teacher and communicator. Biko was very charismatic and inspiring. None of the people that followed him were forced into it, but instead believed in what he was doing. He had a way of making these people feel seen and valued in a time where they were ultimately not and instead looked over. Biko was also fearless. During this time, he had many police altercations, house arrests, threats, but during this time, he did not stop and instead wanted to push forward for his people. He continued to speak, write, organize, teach, even when he knew what the cost it could come at. He was very community centered as well and compassionate about what he was doing. He wasn't just a theory. He wanted to see the real change. He wanted to go into these groups and be the trailblazer for the reason that change would happen. And I think that's why he helped build these clinics, community centers, and literacy groups, because he wanted these everyday people that were like-minded like him, students, families, and workers, to feel empowered and feel like they had a voice and not be dehumanized like they ultimately were during this time. One last trait is he was a visionary. He recognized the physical oppression of the time, but I think he realized there was also a lot more deeper effect that was psychological. If Black people were taught to believe in this time that they were inferior, that is what they believed. And that's when he had a famous quote that said, "No political change is possible unless mental change happens first." I think learning about his character traits kind of leads into his initiative styles and personalities. Um, Biko was ultimately known for being calm and thoughtful during this time, with not taking a violent approach to things. It was said that he listened more than he talked often by his classmates and friends, and he chose his words very carefully, which I think allowed him to be very intelligent, as listening is a very positive attribute to have. But although he was this great guy, he could have had that. He had that intense switch that he was able to flip when need be. Um, he was an excellent writer, organizer, really good public speaker, and just really emotionally intelligent as is, focusing on this community uplift for the people around, not just focused on himself. He actually wanted change to occur, like said. Also went about things with a non-violent approach. He never actually advocated for violence, which is crazy during such a violent time, and that was often the answer. Um, his movement actually just focused on peaceful protests, cultural pride, and liberation, um, because, like it stated, he actually wanted change to happen, and it actually won the hearts over of many people, and was kind of such the dangerous part of the apartheid government, as people didn't want war; they wanted to actually see change. These traits, initiatives, and personality styles that we talked about lead right into Steve Biko's success, which allowed these major accomplishments to occur. In 1968, Biko founded SASO, which is the South African Student Organization. At the time, these student groups, even the ones that were going against the apartheid, were actually led by white liberals often. And this allowed the Black students to continue to feel segregated and sidelined to organizations that were to the organizations that were supposed to represent them. Biko recognized this problem and believed that these black students needed their own voice and own platform to ultimately speak up, which went into the founding of SASO. The purpose of SASO was to create these black-led leadership spaces, promote black self-confidence, develop political awareness, which many people did not have at this time, as a matter of fact, and build a network for young activists. This source ultimately grew really rapidly and was one of the most important black student organizations and movements at the time in the country, which then later became the launching point for what was his next big movement and kind of his main one in the black consciousness movement. It was ultimately his greatest contribution and the idea that he is remembered most for. So you may ask, what is the black consciousness movement? We've been talking about apartheid, SASO, all these other things, but what is the black consciousness movement? Um, the black consciousness movement lives by a philosophy that says before black people can fight for political change, they must fight for internal change. And the apartheid didn't just control laws, it controlled emotions, identity, and self preparation or self perception and kind of how people lived and prepared their life. Biko, another famous quote from Biko, he once said, "The most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed." The movement encouraged black pride, unity among oppressed groups, as during this time there was a lot of political divide in people groups, even of like minds and similar people. There was self-reliance, cultural appreciation, and psychological liberation. It gave people a platform to stand up against the apartheid movement, even when it seemed impossible to create any sort of change. A couple just small community developments that Biko started was the Zanampilo Health Clinic, which was staffed by black doctors only, and it served the black community, which by providing free healthcare and affordable healthcare for the people. Biko also started many literacy and education programs, um, which would be schools, evening classes, and a variety of literacy campaigns, which many people um, during this apartheid movement were not able to get was an education that actually taught them skills that they could use outside of physical labor that they were being put through at this time. Some of these workshops included leatherwork, sewing, agriculture, and just youth employment training. Next was kind of when some of this Biko was able to take off even more when he was banned by the apartheid government in 1973. Biko's influence was continuing to grow, and the government was becoming increasingly afraid of what he would be able to do. So in 1973, he was placed in this banning order, which is one of the harshest restrictions available. He was not able to speak publicly, attend any sort of gathering, leave his hometown, publish writings, or be quoted by any newspaper. He was actually only allowed to speak with one person at a time, and the goal of the government was to totally and completely isolate Steve Biko. But as we talked about his personality traits, that was not going to stop him. Under these strict restrictions, Biko continued to organize quietly, meeting students one by one, writing in secret, and coordinating these community gatherings through his trusted friends to continue his movement. From there, we see his influence on the 1976 Soweto uprising. Although Biko wasn't like prominently involved with this uprising, his ideas were at the helm. When the apartheid government forced the black students to learn in Afrikaans, a language that symbolized their oppression young people rose up, just like Steve Biko would. They were inspired by his Black consciousness philosophy, the student Saso networks, and Biko's writings and speeches. This uprising became one of the most defining moments in the fall of the apartheid, as it just gave a great resource and group of people against the apartheid movement. And many people actually credit Biko for the reasoning of this to happen. But unfortunately, with all great successes and prominent figures, especially in this time, Biko's death came near. In 1977, Biko was arrested during one of the crackdowns on Black consciousness leaders. During this interrogation, he was brutally beaten and suffered severe head trauma. Instead of sending him to medical care, he was handcuffed, shackled naked, and transported over 1,200 kilometers to a prison in Pretoria. Sadly, he then later died about a month later on September 12th, 1977, at the young age of 30. But the positive that comes from that is his death sparked uproar around the nation. Worldwide, protests were beginning, and investigations on the apartheid system and the brutality that came with it came along, which gave some positives to the extremely negative situation. A couple impacts and legacies that Steve Biko left behind was the short-term realization immediately after his death. His ideas spread around the young communities, and there was international pressure on South Africa to gain some unity. He was a positive influence on uh, the apartheid, as his voice and his word kind of allowed it to come to an end. His philosophy, again, later shaped South Africa's national identity, and Biko remains a symbol of courage and consciousness during this time. A couple legacies that he left behind was the founder of these movements, being a martyr for human rights, and a mentor for youth activists, because I think the youth was very important, and Biko was able to realize that. Although there was some controversy during this time for Biko within this protest scene, Biko saw the eyes of who he needed to target, which was the younger generations, because that is where change would come from, and that's where he was ultimately a trailblazer. In the end, we can kind of gather that Steve Biko's life might have been short, but his legacy will be remembered forever through his powerful speaking and his powerful movements. He showed liberations that started with the mind, being a deeply intelligent thinker, and that came with dignity, pride, and self-worth. He ultimately shaped the generations, fueled by resistance, and was able to cause some sort of pushback there. He was a symbol, Steve Biko was a symbol of humanity, courage, and just being someone that really ultimately wants to fight for freedom and saw the betterment of his people, I think. And that was just seen throughout his whole life, even in this last picture here, just the joy he brings to the people around him. And I think Biko is able to do that and bring a joy to a whole society. Thank you, guys.